Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our final webinar in our 6-part Teaching Reading Online series. Again, my name is Allie Rickey, and I'm a facilitator for the James Patterson Literacy Challenge at the University of Florida Literacy Institute, and I will be your host tonight. Again, just a few logistics before we get started. First, all of our webinars are being recorded and will be available on our UFLI website and Facebook page. Our first 5 webinars have already been posted. For those of you who have been with us from the beginning, we've already explored so much, from teaching reading online to the virtual teaching hub, some technology tips and tricks, management and engagement strategies, and a spotlight on primary grades. Tonight's webinar is a spotlight on the intermediate grades 3 to 5, and this recording will be available by tomorrow morning. I want to remind everyone that we're streaming this webinar to Facebook Live right now, so anyone who was not able to jump into the Zoom because it reached capacity, you'll be able to see it on our UFLI page on Facebook, and it'll be in real time and the same exact content. A few features I want to point out if you're watching on Zoom. First, you'll see the closed captioning icon at the bottom. That's the CC at the bottom. You can enable and disable that by clicking that icon. In Zoom, you'll also see a chat box, so feel free to say hello, share resources, and chat throughout the presentation. Also in Zoom, if you have any questions for our presenters, please put those in the Q&A box. So our team, we're going to be keeping track of those, and if we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll try to get some of those questions to our presenters. We also have a team standing by on our UFLI Facebook page, so if you have any questions when you're over there watching it on Facebook, just put it inside of the comments, and our team is going to be putting them together. If you have any questions that don't get answered tonight, and if you would like to keep the conversation going, I'd invite you to join our Facebook group UFLI Virtual Teaching Hub Support, and that's where a lot of questions and great sharing goes on over there. We'll be displaying some QR codes that are linked to some of the resources in our website and social media throughout the webinar, so you might want to have your smartphone handy so you can capture those and save the links. Finally, we're offering verification of your attendance tonight, and at the end of the webinar, we'll share a link to a follow-up survey, and anyone who completes the survey, whether you watched it on Zoom or on Facebook or even watch the recording, this verification email will be sent out next week, sometime next week, by the end of next week, so the week of the 24th. So that's it for the housekeeping. Now I would like to introduce our director, Dr. Holly Lane, to tell you a little bit more about the University of Florida Literacy Institute and introduce our amazing presenters for tonight. Welcome, Dr. Lane.
Thank you so much, Allie, and welcome everyone. As Allie mentioned, my name is Holly Lane, and I'm the director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, or UFLI. And in case you're not already familiar with UFLI, we are a part of the College of Education at the University of Florida. And our mission is to support the development of readers and their teachers. We're really excited to bring you the 6th and final webinar in the series, Spotlight on the Intermediate Grades. In this webinar, you're going to learn how to use the Hub's resources to plan and implement powerful online reading instruction for students in grades 3 through 5. So that's our focus for tonight. If you were with us on the last webinar, the Spotlight on the Primary Grades, there will be some things repeated because we're expecting there's not a whole lot of overlap in the two audiences. But there will also be a lot of new things that are very specific to grades 3 through 5. If you joined us for the other webinars, you already know about the UFLI Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. We'll be sharing the link to the hub a little later, and in this webinar, you're going to get ideas about how to ensure that your instruction is as effective as it can be as you use the tools from the hub. But for now, do us a favor. If you share on social media about these webinars, about the Virtual Teaching Hub, or just even about your own online reading instruction using the tools, please use hashtag UFLI so we'll get to see it. We really can't wait to see all the wonderful things that you're able to accomplish this year in this very strange, different, and exciting kind of endeavor of online teaching. So, all right, enough of all that. It's time to get what you came for. We have two wonderful presenters tonight. They're both fabulous members of Team UFLI, Colleen Pollitt and Talia Campese. Colleen and Talia are both doctoral students at UF. Colleen works with practicing teachers as one of our wonderful school partnership facilitators, and Talia works in our pre-service teacher preparation program. Both of them have been using the Hub's resources to work with children and to support teachers, and they're excited to share with you some of the things that they've learned so far. So take it away, Colleen and Talia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am so excited to take a deeper dive into the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub with you all. We are going to take a closer look at the 6 areas of focus we've built our hub around, and then look at how to actually plan, build, and teach a lesson using the materials available on the hub. First, we're going to do a quick review of some of the important points from previous webinars to situate our learning tonight. You're familiar with this graphic. You've probably seen this visual before, but as a reminder, we know that effective instruction should always be explicit and systematic and include corrective feedback and behavior-specific praise, both about academics and social-emotional behavioral performance. We know these practices are important to maintain during face-to-face instruction, and they're even more crucial as we switch to distance learning. Another graphic that is probably familiar to you, this is the depiction of the simple view of reading. And while we know teaching reading and learning to read is anything but simple, the simple view reminds us that there are 2 main systems at play, decoding and linguistic or language comprehension. And those are the 2 main systems that, when put together, contribute to reading comprehension. And then again, we have the famous Scarborough's rope, created by Dr. Hollis Scarborough. This rope helps us to begin to see the complexity of language comprehension and word recognition by highlighting all of these subsystems and strands of skills that need to be developed and woven together to create a skilled reader. Remember that as these skills are all strengthened and as students develop automaticity with these skills, reading becomes more automatic and comprehension increases. Now, most of the resources on the hub focus on word recognition. This doesn't mean that language comprehension isn't important. It absolutely is. And we will, in fact, be showing you some hub activities that focus on these areas, specifically on vocabulary and language structures when we get into morphology. But again, word recognition is a crucial foundational skill. And unfortunately, we are seeing that it is something that many students are missing. So to illustrate this point, let's look at some national assessment data. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, is a nationwide assessment of 4th grade students' reading comprehension skills that's administered in the United States. In 2019, only 35% of US 4th grade students performed at or above the proficient level on this assessment. So that means that roughly 2/3 of US 4th graders were reading below the proficient level, which is not great. Through our research and through the UFLI team's work with schools across the United States, we have found that word reading is not always as proficient in our students as we might think it is. And while reading comprehension is typically the focus of intermediate grades instruction especially, we need to keep in mind that many of our students, especially many of our older struggling readers, still need that support with word recognition. So that high quality instruction in decoding in conjunction with developing linguistic comprehension, that will lead to increased reading comprehension. So when we are teaching our students to decode, ultimately we are preparing them to comprehend text. So it is our hope that by sharing the hub resources with teachers of all grade levels, we will be able to give you the tools that you need to ultimately ensure that more students successfully learn how to read. Now let's check out some of those resources. So this is a screenshot of the Virtual Teaching Resource Hub. By now you're probably very familiar with this. Today we are going to be focusing specifically on the instructional activities section. We're going to look at how it's laid out and how to use it for planning and delivering instruction in the intermediate grades. So clicking on that instructional activities tab, one thing I want to point out first is our UFLI scope and sequence. As always, we recommend that you first refer to your school and your district guidelines for your instructional pacing and your curriculum materials, but we have made our UFLI scope and sequence available for teachers who may not have their own. So let's take a minute to look at what that scope and sequence looks like. So here it is. The scope and sequence is paced from simple to more complex topics, and it's separated into 14 groups of concepts. So we've grouped the concepts intentionally because we are less concerned with the order in which individual concepts are taught, but we want to ensure that all the concepts in one group have been taught before the next group is introduced. So for example, we want to make sure students have all of the concepts in group 1 down before we go to group 2 and so on. So while this scope and sequence is not aligned to any specific curriculum or set of standards, we've kind of conceptualized the pacing such that all of these concepts are mastered by the beginning of 3rd grade. So within that kindergarten through 2nd grade grade span. So for intermediate teachers especially, this is a really wonderful resource for you to be able to pinpoint the gaps in students' word recognition development and then be able to strategically and systematically provide that individualized instruction and intervention to help your students fill those gaps and become more fluent word readers. So I want you to keep this scope and sequence in mind as we discuss the hub resources that we're highlighting tonight. So now going back to that instructional activities landing page, the instructional activities are divided into 6 main areas of focus. So within each area, we have a set of activities, and that's what we'll look at. When you click on any of the areas, this is just an example of the layout to see what the activity is. So most resources have activity slides, which are linked here. Slides are typically in PowerPoint, but we are working on making Google slide versions available as well. Most activities also have a tutorial that will just provide you some guidance about what this activity is and how to use it. And then some also have sample videos, and these sample videos are real teachers using these activities in real lessons with real students. And we are working on developing more of these sample videos for more of our resources. And all of the samples are done through a distance learning format and are usually one-on-one or a small group format. Once you download a PowerPoint activity, this is what it typically looks like. So this is the morpheme tree activity downloaded and shown in grid view. So the first slide of pretty much every activity is going to be the direction. So that's just for your use as the teacher to kind of orient you to the activity. And then the rest of the slides are there for for use with students. So now let's look at each of these 6 areas of focus individually. First, we have phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is the ability to notice and manipulate individual sounds in spoken language, and it's a critical building block for later decoding development. So while phonemic awareness activities are typically used in the primary grades, especially kindergarten and first grade, they're just as valuable in the intermediate grades, especially for those students who might be struggling with decoding. So as the definition indicates, phonemic awareness is all about sounds and spoken language. So none of our phonemic awareness activities are going to include any written letters or words. It's all purely auditory. So another keyword to discuss when we think about phonemic awareness is the term phonological awareness. We think of phonological awareness as an umbrella term that encompasses all levels of sound awareness. So sound awareness at the word level, the syllable level, the intrasyllabic level or the onset rhyme or body coda level, and then the phoneme level. So phonemic awareness is simply the most discrete level of phonological awareness because it covers an awareness of every single individual phoneme or sound we hear in spoken language. So all of our activities are built at the phoneme level because phonemic awareness is the most important phonological skill for reading development. So for students in the intermediate grades especially, the focus of phonemic awareness instruction should be on more advanced phoneme level skills, such as phoneme deletion and substitution. Here are the 4 activities that are currently available on the Hub that are related to phonemic awareness. So the Elkonin box activity and the phoneme counting activity both focus on phoneme segmentation. And then the sorting game can be used for segmenting phonemes or syllables in words. The Elkonin boxes and the sorting game include some preloaded clip art. And the clip art is used again in replace of words as the target word for students to break apart the sounds in. But teachers can change these images out once they download the PowerPoint. And that might be a good idea to put in images that reflect students' interest or might be more age appropriate. So for example, maybe using real photographs instead of clip art might be more engaging for older students. Finally, the Say It, Move It activity. This is one that can be designed to be a more complex phonemic awareness activity, and it's really ideal for the intermediate grades. So in this game, students manipulate sounds to create new words, which is a higher level of phonemic awareness. And we are going to see an example of how this activity works in a lesson later this evening. Moving on to the next area of focus, Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondences. So phonemes, as we know, are speech sounds, and graphemes are the letters or letter combinations that represent phonemes. So as children develop their early literacy skills, they need to make those connections between the sounds they hear, the phonemes, and the letters and letter combinations or graphemes that they see. They need to connect those together to get kick-started with their decoding skills. And this goes beyond just knowing the letters of the alphabet. So older students especially can benefit from instruction in more complex phoneme-grapheme correspondences, such as different long vowel patterns, silent letter patterns, and more complex graphemes that can represent multiple phonemes. So if we clicked on the Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondence tab, we'll see it is organized like this. So it's organized by grapheme concept. So we begin with the alphabet, and then we move into consonant digraphs, consonant blends, other graphemes, R-controlled vowels, and vowel teams. So if you think back to that UFLI scope and sequence, you can look through that and then get a better idea of how to strategically select which concepts, which phoneme-grapheme correspondences you might need to introduce, or ones that you might need to review with your students. This is another really handy resource that is available in this section of the hub. So when we're teaching phoneme-grapheme correspondences, it's really important to model a pronunciation of each sound in what we call a blendable way. And the reason for that is we want our students to be able to take the sounds that they hear in isolation and be able to blend them together to form words. So while we as adults might know all of our sounds, you'd be surprised to find out that it can actually be very challenging to consciously produce sounds in a blendable way. And for a lot of teachers, myself included, we have to go back and kind of reteach ourselves how to say various sounds just to make sure we're saying them in a blendable way. And this is especially important when we're working with students who are just learning how to decode or are older struggling readers. So this is a video, and the QR code is here for a quick link, and it's available on the Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondence section of the hub. It provides a demonstration of the blendable pronunciation for the most common sound for each letter in the alphabet. So again, this would be a great resource to reference if you need practice, or you just kind of want to check on your pronunciation of sounds to make sure you're pronouncing them in the most blendable way possible to facilitate word learning. So these are the 4 main activities that are available in the Phoneme-Grapheme Correspondence section of the hub. Visual drills and auditory drills are great for quick review of known phonemes and graphemes to build that automaticity. We also have an alphabetical order activity if students need practice with orientation of the alphabet. And then coming soon, we are working on developing slides that support grapheme introduction. So how to introduce certain graphemes for the very first time that once they're introduced can go into your visual and your auditory drills. Moving right along, the next area of focus on the hub is decoding and encoding. So once children develop their phonemic awareness and they're able to make these phoneme-grapheme correspondences and kind of understand that process, they get ready for decoding, for word reading and word spelling. So the activities in this section are designed to help children apply their knowledge of phoneme-grapheme correspondences into their decoding and their encoding. So decoding and encoding, and we'll get into what those terms mean in just a second, those are reciprocal processes, so it's important to address both in our instruction. So let's look a little bit more at what those terms decoding and encoding actually mean. So decoding is essentially, it's another way to say reading. So it's the process of translating print into speech. So the words that we see into orally saying those words. And then encoding is the inverse of that. It's spelling. So it's translating speech into print. So that's why we connect these two skills together, because they are reciprocal processes. The better able we are to read, the better able we are to spell, and vice versa. And practicing reading is going to help us with spelling, and practicing spelling is going to help us with reading. So when we think about decoding and encoding, word work is a great way to use these, to practice these skills in the classroom. So we'll talk a little bit more about word work later, but essentially we can infuse decoding and encoding practice into our word work. And the way that we can do that is just by adjusting the prompts that we give to our students. So for example, if I want to have my students practice decoding, I am going to prompt them by telling them the letters in a word or what letters to change in a word, and then they're going to have to read that word. So for example, if my students have built the word made, and I gave them the direction, okay, change the word made, change the D to an N. So I've given them the letters and they've built that new word, and now they have to go back and decode it and read so they can figure out what their new word is. Another example, instead of giving them the letter, maybe giving them the sound. So if I've built that word made and I say change the D in made to N, read your new word. Again, I'm telling them the letter or sound, but they then have to go back and decode the whole thing. We can even make it a little bit more challenging. If I put a P in front of the word lay, what's my new word? And they'd have to figure out that that's play. Now, encoding, you can use the same words, but you're just going to change the language, the prompt that you give your student. So for encoding, for example, if I had the word seat, and I would tell my students, change seat to set. So I've decoded it for them. They already know they have to make, that new word has to be set. But what they don't know is the letters that they need to change to build that new word. So they have to then figure out that to change seat to set, I have to take away that A, I have to break apart that vowel team to go from that EA that makes the long E sound to just one E that makes the short E sound. Another example, I would ask, what would I have to do to change play into pay? So again, my students understand the word that they need to make. They know that that word's going to be pay, but they have to figure out how to get there. They have to figure out how to encode it. So again, it's important to include both encoding and decoding prompts when you are doing word work with your students, so that we can ensure we are strengthening both of these skills, spelling and reading, simultaneously. A little bit more about word work. Creating word chains is a great way to plan for word work lessons. And we don't currently have word chains available, but these are just some examples and considerations to help you build your own word chains using the word list that we do have available, so that you can better prepare for that encoding and decoding practice. So the first thing we want to do is think about what type of word chain we want to make. So first we can look at the onset rhyme level. So here, only the onset, or everything before the vowel, would change, and then the rhyme, which is the vowel and everything that comes after, would stay the same. So for example, I have, in these words, my rhyme is A-I-N, or ain. So I'm keeping that A-I-N constant throughout my word work, and all I'm doing is I'm changing that initial sound that comes before the vowel. So I'm gonna go from main to gain to pain, and so on. So in planning this word chain, I can be very strategic with the phoneme-grapheme correspondences that I'm practicing, and then by thinking back to that decoding and encoding, I can apply both decoding and encoding prompts to this word chain to build a really well-developed word work lesson. So for example, I can tell my student, change main to gain. So they would have to figure out the spelling, and then I can say, change the G in gain to a P, and then they'd have to figure out their reading. So going back and forth between those prompts will make this lesson really effective. Another level of word chain that we can develop would be the phoneme level. So one example would be the phoneme level with a target. So at the phoneme level, we can change the beginning sound. We can change any sound, any individual sound in the word. So in this example, I'm keeping my target with that AI sound. And the reason I might do that is maybe this is the first time I've introduced the AI grapheme, and I really want to have some repeated targeted practice with just that grapheme remaining constant. But what's different about the phoneme level versus the onset rhyme level is here I'm now changing both the beginning and the ending sound. So I went from main to made, so I'm not leaving that rhyme intact, I'm changing it to paid, to pain, to paint, adding a blend at the end, and so on. And again, I can, depending on the prompts I use, I can fluctuate between decoding and encoding practice. Finally, we can do the phoneme level, but do a mixed review. So this is going to be a little bit more challenging, but what this might look like is changing the beginning, the medial, and the final sound. So here, the difference is that instead of keeping that AI intact, like I did with the targeted practice, I'm now changing that vowel sound. So I went from made to mad. So I went from that long A pattern to the short A. And then as I keep going, I can go from braid to breed, so that long A pattern to that long E pattern. Again, just adding another level of challenge and targeting what our students need. So a few considerations to make when we're building word chains. At all levels, it's important to just change one sound at a time. And then for students who need more support, starting with a more basic word chain, like at the onset rhyme level, might be a good place to start. And then just including fewer words. Maybe you just start with a chain of 5 words and then you build from there, depending on the needs and the abilities of your students. So if you are interested in learning more about decoding and encoding, we have a fabulous article available on the Hub so that you can learn all about Aries phases of word recognition development. This is a really great read that gives you a lot of background knowledge if this is something that might be brand new to you. So moving right along, in our decoding and encoding section, we have 4 main topics: word work, big words, word cards, and word lists. So word work, we talked a little bit about that with using our decoding and encoding prompts and building our word chains. So if you click on the word work tab, you'll see all of the resources that we have. So this is where you'll find our blending boards, our blending drills, our manipulative letters. We also have some videos available to show you. These are sample videos, so showing you how some of these resources work and some of these lessons in action. These are 2 word work resources that I want to point out really quick that would be wonderful for intermediate grades instruction. This is the intermediate word work mat, and then the blending board that we would use for our blending drill. So first, the word work mat. In this looped video, you can see how it works. This is an excellent resource for practicing decoding and encoding. So as you can see, you have the alphabet on the right side and the more complex graphemes to the left. So each tile on the mat represents one sound. The graphemes on the left are color coded just for ease of sorting them and finding which one you need. So you can plan word chains like you just saw, and you can plan those decoding and encoding prompts and then apply it using the word work mat. So using this word work mat digitally, if you have the ability to give your students remote control access of the mouse, they can actually click and drag and move the tiles themselves. If that's not an option for you, then you would maintain control of the mouse and click and drag to build the words, but you kind of let your students like boss you around, and you let them dictate which tiles to move and where to move them, so that you're ensuring that they're doing the thinking and it's not just a modeled lesson. Then moving on to the blending drill, this is our new fabulous blending board. So a few things to point out here. Whereas with the word mat, the student and teacher are working together to build the words, the blending drill, only the teacher is changing the words. It's really designed for students to build their decoding automaticity. So as the teacher changes the words, the students are just focused on reading the new word that has appeared. So a few features to point out here. You'll notice a little history of the words you've built on the right-hand side of the screen. And then the letter tiles here, they are also color-coded, and that's just for ease of being able to differentiate which letters go with the beginning sound, the middle sound, the ending sound, and then the pink letters are those optional ending sounds to add a silent E or add a S or ES to make a word plural. If you want to change the letter tiles, you'll click on this 3-line icon here, and you'll have access to all of the letter tile options. If you want to learn more about this drill, we have a great tutorial on the hub that will take you through in much more detail exactly how to use this and how to apply it in your lessons. So moving right along, big words. This is going to be a really important piece of the hub, especially for our intermediate teachers, because this is all about teaching multisyllabic words. So to read big words, students need instruction in a couple things. They need to learn about syllable types, syllable division patterns, and morphology. And in fact, even fluent decoders can still benefit from this type of instruction. Even me as an adult fluent reader, I am still learning about different morphemes and morphology, and it's just continuing to strengthen my word reading abilities. So just a few highlights here. The Introduction to Syllable Types lesson is a great starting point for teachers who might be new to syllable instruction. And then the open and closed syllable presentation includes activities to help students differentiate between the long vowel sound that they hear in open syllables and then the short vowel sound they hear when those open syllables become closed syllables. The morpheme tree and these 3-column charts here are great for introducing and practicing morphemes, so like prefixes, suffixes, and roots. And we're going to look at that in much more detail in our sample lesson. Another excellent article on the hub is our Teaching Big Words article. So if this is another new topic for you and you want to learn more, check out this article written by Dr. Lane. It is brief. It is a brief yet very, very thorough overview of the basics of teaching syllable types, syllable division, and morphology. So if you're feeling lost with this kind of category of instruction, this is a great resource. The last two pieces of the decoding and encoding section are our word cards and our word lists. So these are the resources that you can use to build out your decoding and encoding lessons. So if you click on word cards, these are what are available. So they're all just kind of categorized by type. And as you can see, we have just recently been able to add both the PowerPoint version and the Google Slide version of all of our word card slide decks. So that's very exciting. So we've got different phonograms, different kinds of vowel teams, R-controlled vowels, different spellings for vowel patterns, different digraphs, and so on. So if you were to open one of the word card files, this is what it would look like. So this is the long A spelling word cards. So they're all formatted the same. You'll see that you have the target concept at the top, and then the actual word cards displayed in this slide deck. And finally, we have our word lists. So similar to the word cards, we have them just listed. If you click on word list, we have everything that's available listed. And again, we are excited to be able to offer these word lists in both PowerPoint and Google Slides. So if we click on and some more that we have available. So if we open one of those slides, this is what it would typically look like. So again, you have your target concept always at the top. So in this case, it's the AY vowel pattern that makes the long A sound. So you'll have a slide that has just the word lists. So it's just plain right there for you. We also have this slide, if you'll notice the presentation icon, these slides have animation. So if you put it into presentation view and you click, you'll just have one word appear at a time. And then last, we have the same deck of word cards, but just with visual isolation. So these are just shapes from PowerPoint. And so if you used this slide in editing mode, you can then click and drag on those rectangles to just reveal certain words at a time to help your students isolate exactly what they're looking at on the screen. This is really, really helpful, especially for distance learning, just to kind of help your students focus their gaze and focus their attention. One last decoding and encoding resource is a resource that was developed by a colleague of ours, Devin Kearns from the University of Connecticut, and it is the Finder tool. It is a fabulous tool. So you can find it with the click here icon on the WordWork landing page. So if you click on that link, you'll go to this page, and then you'll just click on the Finder icon that says go to Finder. So again, this was developed by an educational researcher, Devin Kearns, and it is a wonderful, wonderful way to generate words for word study practice. So we'll show you quickly how this works. So when you open the website, it looks like this, and you'll see that it is numbered. So you're going to just follow the numbered steps to get to the words you want. So the first step is to search for the letter pattern that you want to find. So let's say, for example, I want to work with that AR grapheme. I would click on that. And then once I clicked on that grapheme, all of the phonemes that are represented by that AR grapheme would pop up. So I know when I see those letters AR, it could make 3 different sounds. So I can select all of the sounds that I want to focus on. So let's say in this case, I just wanted to focus on the R sound. So I'm really being targeted where I want words that have AR that make the R sound. Once I click on it, it comes up in number 3 just to confirm my selection. And then I click on search for words. Once I click search for words, this is where the magic happens, and I get a comprehensive list of words that include that specific phoneme-grapheme correspondence, and it is listed in order of frequency. This is really, really incredible because while this list wouldn't be a word chain that you can use, it's not made that way. It's just really great for brainstorming words to come up with. And because it's listed by frequency, using those top higher frequency words is going to be ideal to just give kids that extra practice with those words that they're going to see a lot. So the last thing you'll see on this tool, on this little options logo here, if you click on that, it'll bring you to the settings page. So you can just select and filter by a maximum number of syllables or letters that you want to find, and then just apply those settings and it'll be right there for you. So again, a really, really useful tool that we are so grateful to Devin Kearns for making this available free to anybody who needs it. So now moving along to the irregular word section of the resources. Really quickly, we do have high frequency words available, the fry words and the dolch words, just because we know those are really popular with teachers, but I want to focus on the actual irregular words. So we have heart words and irregular words. So just really quickly, I'm going to explain what these heart words are. So irregular words essentially have pieces that where the phoneme-grapheme correspondences don't make regular sounds. And so we have these heart word slides for you so that as you teach irregular words to your students, you can help them differentiate the pieces of the words that are regular, that make the correct sounds, those are indicated by the squares. And then the pieces that are irregular, those are indicated by the heart, to let us remember that we need to learn them by heart. So for example, when you click on the slide, you'll see the word, and you'll see in the notes section the explanation of what makes this particular word irregular. To teach the word, you can introduce it by covering up that visual aid with a rectangle that's provided on the slide, and then reveal the visual aid to explain what makes this word irregular and what sound symbol relationships match. And then we can cover it up again for practice with reading and spelling. The connected text and writing portions of the hub, we do not have many resources there, but they are important pieces to include in your lesson. So while we do not have our own connected text, we have linked to freely available resources, but we want you to be sure to first just use the tools that you have available to you by your school and your district. And the same for writing. In the writing section, we have some supports for sentence writing, some printable writing paper, and then some guidance for letter formation. Again, as always, we want to make sure that everything that we are doing in the classroom that is good instructional practices, we just translate into our digital instructional practices. We want to make sure our instruction goes in this cycle of being informed by assessment, having our planning based on our assessment, and then having our instruction follow in this kind of cyclical format. We're not going to get into assessments for online instruction, but I just want to point out it is something that should be done. And again, refer to your specific school and district to be sure about the specific assessments that you're going to want to administer. This is just a quick clip to show what a virtual assessment might look like.
Complete, Meyer, Rome.
So again, assessing, we want to do it one-on-one, so you can still do that in a digital format, and just make sure we're using assessment data to guide our planning and our instruction. Other things to consider when planning are group size. So the resources available and the lessons we're creating are really primarily designed for small group instruction. So kind of keep that in mind as we're planning. We also want to consider whether our instruction is synchronous or real time and live, or asynchronous or recorded previously. There are pros and cons to both, and good reasons for both. And finally, we want to plan with the materials and the curriculum we have in mind, and most importantly, the time that we have. This is another resource, visual that you've seen before, just to remind us that we want to plan. We might not be able to get everything done in one day, so we want to plan. It might make more sense to plan over a multi-day period, and we want to plan with our assessments, our curriculum, and our time in mind. So I've talked enough this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Talia, and she is going to take you through how to take all of these resources I shared and actually build and teach a lesson.
Hey everyone, I'm Talia. It's nice to see you guys. Thank you so much, Colleen. We're gonna dive in now to use the hub to plan, build, and then teach a lesson. We're gonna go through one specifically. We're gonna look at both the lesson structure and the instructional activities as our primary source of resources for this part of that, the webinar. When you go into the lesson structure, you're gonna see both resources for the UFLI reading lesson planning table and examples of how this table might be used. I start by downloading this table to plan out my week of lessons. Here you'll see what this table looks like. This is available as a Word document, so it is completely editable. You can include additional areas of focus based on your students' needs and school requirements. This is just an example. In the first column of the first table are the activity categories we have on the hub. Makes it easy to find them when you're looking for these resources. Attempting to fit activities in all these categories is not really doable in an online setting or even during a regular school day. So make sure you pick out what you want, and you can stretch those out over a 5-day plan, and you can spread it out. The table at the bottom is the activity menu, displaying the activity options for each topic, which is really helpful. They're hyperlinked here as well, which makes it really easy to access this during your planning time. The most important thing to look at is the time you have during each section. So here is an example of how a week could look for your online synchronous instruction with a small group. Remember that everyone's schedules and requirements are different, so these are just one example of a 30-minute lesson that you could do. As you can see, we're using the Say It and Move It activity for PA on days 1 through 4, and then alternating between visual and auditory drills for the Phoneme-Grapheme review. For decoding and encoding, we're focusing on morpheme instruction and practicing on days 1, 3, and 4, and doing a blending drill for decoding on fluency on day 5. We are practicing irregular words on day 2 and 5, and finally we're including reading and writing every day for the bulk of the lesson. Taking this lesson structure example, let's see what it might look like in action. So here is a more fleshed out version. I would start on the previous slide and then go here and add more details for myself during the plan. We're going to quickly go through day 1, how I would build that in a PowerPoint, and then how I would actually implement that with students. I would start with my lesson structure. Today we're going to download a 4th grade lesson structure template to help us get started. This is where it is. Once you download it on your computer, this is what it would look like in grid view, or slide sorter view is another terminology you might see in your PowerPoint. Once you download it, make sure that you go and duplicate it and then save it for your lesson, so you have both the template and the lesson where you're going to be editing in it on your computer for you. So once I'm here, I'm going to build my visual schedule first. This will really help keep my students on task and me on task as well. I'll use these 2 slides to help grab the activities I'll have for that day. They have images of each activity. I'm going to select only the ones I need for my day 1 lesson. I'm also going to select the check mark to make sure I can check off what I'm doing through that day. So for day 1, I have Say It, Move It, the visual drill, morphemes, sentence writing, and my connected text that I'll need for my visual schedule. This is what it would look like for my students. It has my expectations and the schedule that we'll go through for that day. Next, I'm going to build my rest of my PowerPoint outline using that schedule. I'll delete everything I don't need. Remember, we're working from a copy of the template, so we can always go back later and grab the ones that we've deleted from the other copy. So I've deleted all these that I don't need except for the ones that are on my schedule. And this is what I'm left with. And now I'm going to go back into the hub and start downloading the actual resources to fill these activities in. For example, I might download the visual drill, and I decided to go with vowel teams for this group of students. And my focus was on long vowel sounds for these vowel teams. So I'll copy and paste these into the PowerPoint for myself, and then I can get rid of the visual drill PowerPoint. Next, I will also do this for the morphemes. What's important for the morpheme when you're copying and pasting in the morpheme trees, you will definitely need to find the little clipboard that comes up and click on that, and then it'll take you to heap source formatting to make sure the tree pops back up. Otherwise, you might lose that tree when you're pasting. So then after that, you'll move on to finishing filling out the rest of your lesson plan so that it's all available for you, and you save that for whatever day and whatever group you're about to use this presentation with. So then when you're going to instruct, you'll start with your schedule, and you'll go through your schedule with your students and your expectations. This will really set it up for a more positive learning experience for you and your students. We started with Say It, Move It. This is going to be a phonemic awareness activity, so there's only going to be sounds. We're not going to use letters during this activity. For my older students, I did change the colors, and I might do something like, let's do the sounds in sip. It'll go sip, sip, and then I would put a circle up for each sound. Then I'd go to slip. So I started with sip, and to make it slip, I'll have to add the ooh in between the s and the I, so slip. And then to make it slips, you'll notice something really particular here. The S sounds, the S at the beginning and the S at the end, will be the same color to indicate that those are the same sound at the beginning and the end of the sound. All I did to make this more intermediate friendly was just change it from that primary color palette to a more older, mature color palette. You might notice that my chart for myself is visible here, but if there's an advanced way to share in Zoom, you'll notice in the green, you can hide your notes from your students by going into your advanced options in Zoom and only sharing a portion of your screen, which can be really helpful. This is what your students would see with that advanced sharing. So once you're done with that, you check it off on your schedule, and you can move on to your visual drill. The visual drill, you saw how I loaded it in. The way your students will do this with you is you would show it in presentation mode, and you go AI says A is what your students would have to do. It would be the same, you just click next, AY says A, and then the last thing to really get with this drill is if there's a word or a grapheme set that has more than one sound, like EA says E and EA says eh, you can have your students prompt them to say both if they've learned both, but if they haven't learned both, just go with the one you've taught that so far. When you're editing in the visual drill, it's really simple to just add, you just delete the part that you don't want and you can add it back in and it keeps the same formatting for you. So that's a really simple thing with that. So that's the visual drill. Next would be morphemes. When you're doing the morphemes, you would start with your matrix to introduce your morpheme. Here is the root word deuce or duct that I pulled from the hub. And I would just use this, I would go through a couple of the combinations like induce, what would that mean? And then talk about how it is to lead. Then I'd go maybe induct, induction. And then I might get to like product and then talk about how we have to change our pronunciation to product to make it a word that's familiar because we have different stresses on different things. And then once we're done introducing the root, we can move into reviewing prefixes and suffixes. That might be helpful in your instruction later for whatever you plan to use with the trees. You can just pull pieces from here and highlight the ones that you need. You'll see an example of this in just a second. Once you reviewed the prefixes and suffixes, you can go to your morpheme tree. Here's where I spend most of my section of this part of the lesson. Doing here, we read words and define them, and I allow students to pick which ones we want to go through and read and define together using our knowledge of the morphemes. Next, you'll see a video clip, a short video clip of how this might be used with a group of students. So we can go ahead and play that. We talked about in the beginning. Yeah. Put your finger on your nose if you can recall what trans meant, what that prefix trans meant. We talked about it in the beginning. I can go back and we can read it again. Who can read to me what trans meant? Let's read it all together. Trans means across beyond. Good. So let's look at the combination of trans port. We know that trans means what again? Across beyond. Yeah, and what does port mean? Together. So what together, type in the chat, what would transport mean? So I'm gonna quickly just keep moving on because I know I wanna respect your time. I know it's 8 o'clock. The next two things in the lesson would be connected text and sentence writing. For connected text, I just linked a news ELA article real quickly. It's one of the resources we have in the connected text. It's really simple to link it in to your PowerPoint by just copying the link, clicking on your PowerPoint and embedding a link, and then that will take it when you're in presentation mode directly to the article that you chose to read with your students. We can probably skip the video on us working on this article just for the sake of time, and then move on to sentence writing, which would be the final thing. Just some really cool tools that you can pull from the Resource Hub for sentence writing. This is a CAPS editing tool that's in one of the sample lesson plans in the 4th grade folder. I like to use these just squares, shapes on PowerPoint to help represent words in a sentence. For example, if my sentence was, a canal is an excellent way to transport enough important products that I wanted my students to read, I would point to the squares as I was reading to provide a visual representation for them. And I also provided some scaffolding for the 3-syllable words that my students were working on with the smaller squares within them. I like to use Zoom chat a lot when I'm using the sentence writing. I've had my students type to me privately how they would write that sentence, and then I can provide individual and specific feedback right away to those students without having to give everyone all the information, and then maybe give some whole group instruction at the end if they have common mistakes. We also can do this in Google Slides. Real quickly, you can see, you can just make them all their own slide, send them the link, and they just work only on their slide, and then you can put it in grid view and see all of theirs. And you can also provide individualized feedback through this as well, and allow them to have some additional practice. You'll see here the students spelled enough incorrectly, so they're going to practice that in those text box provided. And then that would be a whole lesson, about 30 minutes. You would finish with your incentive or reward. I've learned a lot of TikTok dances working with my older students. As an incentive, they teach them to me. They think it's hysterical that I can't do them. So it's just a great way to keep them engaged. Just remember, our work is not over when the lesson is finished. We need to make sure to plan based on how the students did during that lesson, as well as continuous progress monitoring. What is progress monitoring? We're not going to teach you how to do that or what tools to use, but here are a few questions to reflect on. Which skills do I need to be monitoring? What do my students need? Do some students need progress monitoring more than others? Will frequency vary for individual students? How will I collect and manage my data? And most importantly, how will I use my progress monitoring data to inform my instruction? So that's the way the cycle continues and the way you keep this data-informed instruction going. And I'll turn it over to Holly.
Thank you, Talia, and thank you, Colleen. This was wonderful. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So this was the final webinar in our series. And if you missed any of the previous webinars, you can access them all on the UFLI website. And please share with your colleagues and make sure that they get to see them as well. Oops. So we have, there we go. There's the link for the UFLI website. And on the website, in addition to the UFLI Virtual Teaching Resource Hub, you'll see the Dyslexia Resource Hub and the Parent Resource Hub. There's the link for the Virtual Teaching Hub. If you haven't visited that yet, we encourage you to do that as soon as possible. And if you haven't already, go like us on Facebook so that you'll get notifications when we are rolling out something new, adding new resources, because that's usually Facebook and Twitter are where we usually announce those things first. There's our also our virtual hub support group on Facebook. If you're using it and you have questions about it, you can post there and either one of our team will answer it, or often another teacher will answer it. The group has grown tremendously and it's extremely helpful. I wanted to mention here that remind you that all of the resources on the Hub are free, and we'd really like to keep them that way. So we hope that you'll consider supporting our efforts with a donation to UFLI so that we can keep on putting out some materials for teachers to use. As we mentioned earlier, you can get verification of your attendance if you complete the survey at this link. You can also get there using that QR code. All of the verifications will be sent out next week. So if you want one, you need to hurry up and complete the survey no later than Sunday night. And that is it for this webinar series, Teaching Reading Online. We are so happy that you joined us for it, and we wish you the best of luck with your virtual teaching, and good night.